Wonderful. I'll get started.
All right.
Welcome to the very first episode of Let's Talk Media, a web series produced in partnership with the Digital Media Connecticut, DMCT, and a new group of Connecticut women, badass female filmmakers, or BFFs. Through this web series, aspiring filmmakers and media professionals are invited to join Connecticut women in live conversations via YouTube about their careers in independent documentary filmmaking. Each episode will feature an hour of conversation, followed by 30 minutes of questions from their virtual audience. As tonight's episode evolves, please take advantage of the YouTube chat box to submit questions to the panelists, which we will ask during the Q&A section at the end of the panel discussion. Now, let me introduce myself and the panelists. I'm Heather Elliott Familaro, and I'm the department head for digital media and design in the School of Fine Arts at the University of Connecticut, where we just started a new BFA major in digital film video production. I'm tonight's host, and I'm thrilled to welcome two incredible Connecticut filmmakers, Jennifer Boyd and Karyl Evans, who are going to share their insight and experience in tonight's Let's Talk Media live stream, how to survive and thrive as documentary filmmakers in Connecticut. So, Miss Jennifer Boyd, hi Jen, is a multiple Emmy Award-winning producer, director, and owner of Boyd Productions. And we're going to paste that link into the chat box there so you all can see that. And she has produced more than 25 documentaries and 40 music entertainment shows. Good Morning America recently called her documentary, 3 Seconds Behind the Wheel, groundbreaking. Jennifer's work can be found on American Public Television, PBS International, and Amazon Prime Video. And her projects have been written up in Forbes, Rolling Stone, Playbill, USA Today, the New York Times, Billboard Magazine, and more. Jennifer is currently producing and directing The Street Project, an inspiring story about a massive movement across the US and around the world to reclaim our largest public spaces, our streets. In addition, she's directing a 5-part series on the history of Las Vegas and a documentary on the Mesa Verde National Park. And let me show you a little short clip on that work. Just give me a second to get that open and share the screen. 1 second here. And Jen, you want to say a couple words while I cue that up?
Sure. I'm really excited to be here. I hope that you find the next hour or so helpful. And I'm always around down the road. I live in Connecticut, so I'm always around for questions after this is all over. So,
thank you. All right, so let's go ahead and watch this content.
Hello. Hi.
Hey, you got him?
Yeah, what's up? Hello.
Oh. Hey.
Right now?
Excellent. Okay, so let me get back here to where I was a second ago. All right.
There's Karyl. Hi, Karyl. There you are.
All right. We have a slight delay there. She's popping in. Miss Karyl Evans is our next panelist. So Karyl is a 6-time Emmy Award-winning 25 years, including the history of African Americans in the state of Connecticut and the history of Connecticut cities. Ms. Evans is in the early stages of working on a new documentary project about the history of Indigenous peoples in the state of Connecticut, which is funded by the Connecticut Humanities. For her last film, Letter from Italy, 1944, A New American Oratorio, Karyl directed Academy Award-winning actor Meryl Streep, who narrated the film. And let me again share the screen, and I'm going to show a reel from her website, which again, we will paste that into the chat box, and you can see her see it real time. I do apologize, just so you know, it may be a little bit laggy for the live stream, but we're going to be sure to post any of the links that we show in our stream into that YouTube chat box. So you'll be able to watch those on your own and also view them later when this is recorded and then put into for permanent use. Okay, so let me share my screen again. All right, here we go.
I can't hear. I can't hear. Now I can hear.
Fantastic. All right, let me just get out of my there we go. All right, so it looks like we've got some viewers here. We've got 12 viewers in there. I want to remind you again to please use the chat box to go ahead and type in any questions you may have at the end of the piece. I also want to add too a little bit more about Karyl. She has produced and directed a 10-part series for Connecticut Public Television about elder issues, as well as a series of short documentaries on CPTV and the state of Connecticut on the state's greatest cultural treasures, including the Florence Griswold Museum, the Hillstead Museum, and the Grove Street Cemetery. Mrs. Evans was a full-time professor at Southern Connecticut State University from 2005 to 2007, teaching all aspects of filmmaking. So she's been there. She knows what you new students are up to. And most recently, Ms. Evans produced a passion project about the landscape artist Beatrix Farrand, which the filmmaker screened at 80 venues around the country. She's currently a fellow at Yale University and is the owner of Karyl Evans Productions, LLC in North Haven. And welcome, Karyl Evans.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to both of you for joining us tonight. This is so exciting. Okay, so let's get started with some questions, and we will then again get to everyone's additional questions afterwards. So as we're asking the questions, or if either Karyl or Jennifer say something that you're really excited about or want to have a follow-up on, again, please use that chat box so that we can then answer those questions in about 45 minutes. All right, so let's start at the beginning. So at the beginning of your careers, how did you educate yourself from within your field? Karyl, do you want to start?
Sure. Well, I actually, I started as a horticulture major. So I always said to my students, really, you know, you can start anywhere and you can then decide to go into a career in media. So once I really decided what I wanted to do, in my family, you got a degree. So that's what I did. I was living in Connecticut. And so I decided to go to California, where things were happening in the 80s, and got my master's degree. And I took every course there was in video production, along with writing a 200-page thesis. So you know, that's how I got that initial education. But as soon as I graduated, I pursued a first job just in anything, because I just needed to learn as much as I could. And while I was in school, I also did a number of internships. And what I realized was that's almost how you learn what you don't want to do. Because when I worked in news, I thought, oh, I just have to work in news. Hated it because, you know, it turns out it's always bad. On an ABC affiliate in San Diego with the highway shootings at that time, saw my first murdered person, you know, fires and all that. And I thought, well, that's not really great. And then I did an internship with a variety show, and that was fantastic. You know, it's just so much more fun. So I'm a feature person. I'm really not a hard news person. So I really feel internships are great. And then I went to get the first job at a TV station as a production secretary, but kind of any way you can get in to start figuring out what part of the business you want to do is a great way to do it.
And let's see, for me, I always thought that I would go into lighting design. My dad, as a side job, he was an electrical engineer, and he did lighting for various stages around Connecticut as a sort of a part-time thing. Anyway, so I went to college. Well, I started doing lighting in high school, you know, the different productions in high school, design. And then I went off to the Newhouse School at Syracuse. And once, I'd say within the first 2 months at Newhouse, I realized that there was a much bigger world out there. That lighting was really great and cool, and maybe I would do that, but boy, it was really interesting to produce or direct or be a DP. And so suddenly the world opened up. And then I realized along the way through internships that I really wanted to direct, I really wanted to produce, and I really wanted to do documentary production. I did come back to Connecticut, and I have to tell you that my entire professional career has been based out of Connecticut, and I'm thankful for it. It's an awesome home base, and I highly recommend it to everyone. And I will tell you that, you know, we get to travel, we get to do things around the world and locally, but it is possible to have a vibrant career here in Connecticut.
I think that's what every young person wants to hear, because of course, as teachers, we always hear how they want to get out of Connecticut because they don't know that there's these opportunities. So this is what's so great about this Let's Talk Media series, is we're being able to prove out there to the doubting folks that we really have some possibilities here. So let's talk a little bit about the switch, or the way you got specifically, you both came from two very different backgrounds between TV and lighting. So or news and lighting. So how did you get into the decision to go into documentary filmmaking specifically?
And Jennifer, you have to comment. I mean, I was doing my work at that time. It must have been very unusual for a woman to be doing lighting. I mean, you never saw a woman in lighting or really directing. So that must have been incredible for you at the time. I mean, was it?
Yeah, so I often tell, and I'll just tell you this really quickly. I did do a bunch of internships in Manhattan, and then paid gigs, and thought I would do feature films and commercials and that sort of thing. And really, when they talk about the Me Too movement, and I think back to the 80s and 90s, it was, sexual harassment was every day. And there really were no women that were directing and producing at the time in those worlds. However, when it came to television news, documentary, the PBS world, there were a group of women that had paved the way, that first generation, and they might have been hard assets. Yes, I can say that. And so they paved the way for the next generation to do what we do. And then the last, and I can talk more about that later, but then the last point is I did always want to use the medium to make a difference. And that's where the documentary production came in.
That's so true, because I was in feature films first, and I had gotten this, you're just reminding me, I totally forgot about this. I got this award in graduate school that the person with the most potential to do inspirational work and to change the television industry, really, that was the award. So I went into feature films, and you know, everything was pretend, and you know, that's all fine. But it wasn't until I did a documentary, I got a chance to do two. One was when I first got to LA, and it was within the first 3 months of being in LA, and I'm 25 years old. And the woman who I'm doing the film about, who's a costume designer, said, well, I've decided the 3 people I want you to interview: John Huston, John Frankenheimer, and Robert Wise, who directed Sound of Music. And I'm like, I have died and gone to heaven. Within, 3 months, I'm interviewing these people. So that was just the incredible people you get to meet that did real things. And then I was hired on a PBS documentary called Legacy of the Hollywood Blacklist. And we were talking with the wives and the children of the actual Hollywood 10. I just got chills because these are the real people that went through it. And to me, that was so much more satisfying to hear their stories and gratifying, and then to give them a voice because they felt voiceless. And to me, the power of being able to tell these stories was so important to me that I said, that's it, documentary films.
So that was sort of your hook moment then. Jen, do you have a similar hook moment?
A hook moment. Well, no.
That passion project?
The passion project. I will tell you, all along, as I started to think about where I wanted to go with this career, it's a very different process for me. And that, yes, I knew I wanted to make a difference with the medium and tell stories, and I didn't have specific stories. But I also had a strong feeling about what I wanted my life to be like. And I feel like very early on, I knew that I wanted a freelance career. I had a picture of what my office would be like in my 30s and 40s, and what my lifestyle would be like. And I had a very clear picture of the kinds of work I wanted to do. It didn't mean that I didn't have to do other things along the way to get to that point. But I kind of was intensely focused from early on simply being able to use the medium to create change.
Excellent. And here we are, still out there, changing the world, one film at a time.
Right.
So let's do a little bit of a shift, because I know there's a lot of students and new filmmakers and aspiring filmmakers out there that are sort of not sure exactly about the roles that there are within the documentary filmmaking industry specifically. So what are some of the major titles, and what does that person do in each of those roles?
So I always think of the, film and television are quite different, but I'll talk about television for now, in that the executive producer credit, that gets given to a lot of different people for a lot of different reasons. They could have been the person who brought the idea to you, or they found some money, or they introduced you to the, like I worked with Meryl Streep. So the person introducing me, you can get executive producer credit for a lot of different things. Usually in television, it is putting together the money and then hiring like the producer and director. Let's say you kind of see, you get a lot of say. And then really it's the producer that really works closely to hone down which director that they feel that they could really work with, who she really is, got a similar vision, so the director doesn't take it in a place the producer never thought it should go. Generally, the director, and Jen can speak to this, is really the person in charge on the set, and really the vision, the creative part of it, and the producer is there to support the director as far as making sure the bills are being paid, maybe getting the crew, there, or that kind of thing. But the director is scheduling everything, making sure that the vision of the picture is going, that they're hiring the production designers, they're hiring the composer, they're hiring really the costume designer. Do you want to continue, Jen, on all the things you do as a director?
Yeah. So I will tell you guys that it's different depending on where you work and what medium you're working in. And so for a while, I ran the local and national production departments at Connecticut Public Television. And there, as the executive producer, I would go out with account executives and look for money. I would, hire people for projects. And when I had a free moment in time, I might be able to go off and produce some of my own projects. And often in the documentary world, the producer and director are the same human. At least for everything I've done, it's usually that way. More recently, it's sort of switched in that I became the executive producer / director, and then somebody else has helped with the producing side. And what that really means, the executive producer is at the end of it all, in charge of all the legal stuff, in charge of making sure it's all the contract stuff, making sure the insurances are correct, liability, disability, deal memos with everybody you work with, and I can talk about that another time. And the director is really focused on the visual image, and yes, hiring the crew, but then once you decide on who you want to work with, then the producer would, if the jobs are separated, the producer would then take care of doing all the detail work of creating the schedule for the day, making sure that that all the crew members get what they need and they're ready for that day, helping the director with all those sorts of logistics. Again, if it's a small budget, if it's a social media project, if it's whatever, you're doing all of it. You're in charge of finding the money, you're in charge of being the mommy, which is that producer role, and you're in charge of the visuals, and you probably are in charge of the editing, the writing, and everything else. But for bigger budget stuff, there are categories, and some people are better at editing, and some people are better, go figure, at writing and at producing and at directing. So the more we can fight for individual roles for things, I believe the better that our content can be.
And I will say, as a professor, the students would always say, I'm going to direct right away. And I would say, it's really great experience to be on a few sets first and really see like what it takes to be a director. I had a shoot today, and it's all business. I mean, you're basically telling everybody on the set really what needs to happen. So, to come out as a 21-year-old and think you're going to go on a set with a lot of money and direct when you've not done anything is quite unlikely. So don't think of it as a step down. If you get on some sets and you're the assistant producer and assistant director, that's great. You can just learn so much on set.
So I'm thinking about a little bit of a follow-up to that for both of you, because you brought up so many other kind of roles out there. So the director, producer, executive producer, sort of these major roles. But you both introduced yourselves. I'm the same way. We kind of do it all. When we think of from pre-production to production to post-production, from research to shooting to editing and finishing, what's your favorite part? Where do you feel like you come to life as the most excited part as a filmmaker?
For me, it's the interview. I love the opportunity to meet people, to enter people's lives. I feel like it's a privilege and an opportunity to learn about all sorts of people, no matter who you are or where you are. And in that way, it's such a gift, this profession, because you're constantly learning about people, their personalities, what they do for a living, how they live their lives. It's just a constant. If you're naturally curious, there's nothing like a job like this.
Yep. I would say, I love the interview process too. It gives you complete access to somebody, anyone from a young guy who was a high school student who was a boxer and in an inner city boxing club. And of course, when would I ever talk to this kid? He came in and he's spending like an hour with me, telling me all about, why he's in the boxing club, to Annie Leibovitz in our New York City studio explaining, why she does the photography she does. It's unbelievable. But I will say, for me, the editing is just magic, because you actually, for me, I have to figure out actually at that point what the story is. Because unlike feature films where everything's, all down on a piece of paper, where you edit this and you edit that, and you're just kind of looking at who does the best takes when. In documentary filmmaking, often you're really figuring out the story when you sit down at the edit table and you're like, okay, what is the story? And then you have to just start. And it's a bit arduous because, for the history of Connecticut cities, I did 100 interviews. So then I have 100 hours of interviews just to go through. That's before we even talk about B-roll.
I hate that.
Yeah, finding B-roll maybe not the most favorite part of the production. Conversely, right?
I love it.
So switching gears here to a little bit different. Let's talk about skills for our aspiring filmmakers out there. What are the kinds of skills that you might need to be successful in this business? And by skills, of course, we can think of technical skills, but also, you know, those soft skills, those people skills. What do you, when you're looking for interns or and looking to work with people, what do you want to see in a young person?
I would say that an ability to learn quickly, an ability to, you know, technology plays such a role in every aspect of what we do now, the way we communicate, the way we're having this conversation now. And the folks that can pick that up quickly, or just have, or the folks that can find people to help them get the answers quickly, you know, that's everything. So I guess the ability to sort of change, you know, Karyl and I can both speak to how much our industry has changed over the years. And in order to survive, you just kind of constantly have to be remaking yourself. You know, 3 years ago, I was doing music entertainment. And before that, documentary, but music. I hadn't done a documentary in ages. And then funding ran out. That ended, sadly. And so I'm doing back to documentaries again. It's just an ability to just keep changing, to work in teams, to take direction. You know, it's that, I don't know. Go ahead, Karyl. What do you think?
Yeah, you know, it's people you want to be around, because usually you end up, you know, if you're on location, you really are around them all the time. Or if you're on a project, you're still around people. So it's really people you enjoy being with, you know, just to kind of start. And that's why there's so much networking involved, because people want to kind of feel out, are you the kind of person I'd really want to be around, you know, a lot of the time before they commit to actually hiring you for anything. But it's being resourceful. I remember at the DGA, the way they picked the trainees for the Directors Guild of America is they brought all the students in and they said, go find this list of 20 things. And it's literally, how resourceful can you talk people into stuff? Can you find things? Can you think of a way to get it? I mean, that's all the things that happen on a set. You got to tell people, you've got to be quiet for 30 minutes and be so nice about it. And then somebody needs, you know, a stack of pillows, and you've got to go find pillows. And then somebody needs an arrangement, and you got to go ask somebody, can I take the arrangement off your desk? Very resourceful, but very respectful, you know, not arrogant and bullying in any way. So there's a lot of people skills and a lot of organizational skills. And until you get to the top, you don't have to be like, you know, artist creative, because it can almost be, when you say a faux pas, it can almost be annoying as the director on the set and a production assistant tells you where they think you should put the camera. I mean, the other person's been there for 20 years, so that's really not your role at that point, unless you're asked. And then, yeah, they want to know what your opinion is, and that's great. So I would say, you know, being respectful of what everyone's position is, and then being resourceful.
Yeah. So Jen, what are the faux pas no-nos of conversely also, since
Yeah, Karyl's right. I mean, if as an intern or production assistant, really just coming in and being willing to help at every stage. I remember my first jobs were, you know, I'm working on these commercials, and you just had to look busy. And even though you felt so awkward and you didn't know what your role was, and everyone was kind of your boss, and you would just have to make sure you were standing attentive. You kind of walked around. It was so awkward, but you know, you just have to be there, ready and willing to help. And you're right, you just have to understand your role of just being willing to help, but staying back a little bit, because if you start interjecting, people will sort of shy away from you and not want to bring you back on a set again. Or so, but we certainly love and need the help and want folks working with us. So, but I know people feel that way.
Yeah. So when did each of you decide that you were going to start your own production companies? It's a huge deal. How long ago was that, if I dare ask? And what gave you the chutzpah to go ahead and make that huge commitment? Jen, do you want to start?
Sure. Okay. So like I said from the beginning, I pretty much always knew that I wanted to freelance. I think that I liked the freedom and control of having my own business. But I did work. I directed news for a while, which was really not my personality. It was the hardest job I've ever had. But I learned a lot, and there are plenty of jobs like that. But I will tell you that you will take early on where you feel like you're just sort of building character. But really, right from the beginning, I was freelance. And to tell you the truth, now even more than when I first started, really the majority of jobs are freelance. There's no doubt about it. And I guess I've forgotten the question. When did I? Oh. So to me, it wasn't bravery. I'll end by saying that for me, job security is being freelance because I have lots of different clients. And if one client isn't doing well and doesn't have any work, or one funder is no longer going to fund a project, at least I've built other relationships, or continue to build other, where I have always felt it's a little risky to work with one company. My one company, really, aside from Channel 3 WFSB, where I directed news early in my career, was Connecticut Public Television, but they were a client for a long, long time. Then I came to work with them and loved them, and I learned so much from them. And then, then I got laid off, okay? So, but thankfully, I had still had, freelance work on the side, and then I was able to pick up my business again.
And that happens all the time in our industry. I've never heard of a permanent gig as like a documentary filmmaker. Maybe some people do it, but basically, and you do grow if you change, from my first station was a independent television station, worked at a feature film company, worked for Shelley Duvall at her production company for Showtime. Then I did a little thing for ABC affiliate in New Haven, CPTV I've worked with since 1990. And so it wasn't, I guess, when I started getting commissions. So I get this commission. I'm working as the head of the Media Arts Center, which is actually where I met Jennifer back in like 92, 93. And I get a commission to do this film. And I said, why are you asking me to do the Amistad film? Well, you're just, you grew up in Connecticut, and, you are the typical person we're trying to, tell the story to, the story that, nobody seems to know. And so we want you to do it. And so anyway, I did that. And then I wrote a grant to do another film, African American Freedom Trail, and did that one, won an Emmy. And then I did the history of African Americans in Connecticut, won 3 Emmys, and that was in 1999. And then I decided I said, oh, okay, I guess I'm going to be able to do this. So I started my company in 1999. And although I've taken little departures when there's been, say, a recession, like I taught for 2 years full time at Southern, for the most part, I've always tried to do other jobs on the side. I will say when I worked full time at Southern, I didn't do one other film. It was so overwhelming to be a full-time professor. Oh my gosh. But other than that, I've always tried to do, sometimes it's classroom videos for the Yale School of Management. Sometimes it's an animated series. Sometimes it's a 1-hour documentary. Sometimes it's a 30-second marketing spot. It's just whatever comes up, you've got to do if you have your own company.
With that in mind, then, starting your own company, you both talked about sort of diverging from like working for someone. And I think, of course, it's so difficult, particularly with the cuts in public media in particular, that have happened over the last 20 years. I'm sure there were many, many, many independent filmmaking companies that came out of those cuts from supporting public broadcasting in particular, and independent production. So how do you find clients for projects, and for you to produce, and then to keep those clients and to keep building those relationships? And related to that, if it makes sense to talk about it together, would be the funding, with that, because it's kind of two-step: the clients, the funding, if you have those passion projects, the things you really want to work on.
Okay, so I have two things here. Well, probably many, but whatever, I'll say two. Um, when you first get started in the field, it's very tempting to go where the money is, right? And in Connecticut, the money might be in corporate video, and that may be fine and wonderful. But if you're somebody who wanted to do something different and you start in corporate video, it will be really hard to go do something else because corporate video pays very well. Or it might be advertising, but you find that you want to do something in social media. Well, advertising pays pretty well. So to start with, being true to what you want to do early on when money doesn't matter quite as much, they call it the golden handcuffs. You just have to be very sensitive to that. And the reason why I say that, though, is because there certainly may be times where you're doing projects. Now, this is for me because I knew I wanted to be a documentary filmmaker, where you're doing other projects like corporate projects, like nonprofit projects, whatever. And that's wonderful. And I appreciate those projects. But down the road, building those relationships has been and continues to be helpful for my documentary work. So some of my funders now that I have for my documentary projects, I built early relationships with on the corporate side. Some of the nonprofit folks taught me or helped me with contacts that eventually led me to my documentary work. So I guess the moral is stay focused on what you want to do, but that's sort of the way I've found clients by just staying focused and looking at corporate and looking at nonprofit, looking at some, and I can elaborate afterwards.
Yeah, it's like being open to really everything. And my sister jokes that every time she comes to visit me, whether I'm at Home Depot or in the grocery store, I'll always run into somebody and they always say, "We need a video." And so she goes, "All you have to do is like walk around town," and everyone's saying, "We need a video." She saw that twice while she was visiting me at different times. So it really is about the networking. And so many young people, I find, I have a son who's 26. They don't want to like use a network. They like, "Oh no, I don't want to call my mother's friend who's a producer on CBS this morning." It's like, why? Because there's no other way they would ever meet you, and you're really good at what you do. You'll have to prove yourself in an interview. You'll have to prove yourself if you ever get a chance. But I say use every network tool you have. I mean, I get clients when I go to, say, the Connecticut Women's Hall of Fame. I met the president of the Girl Scouts, and she said, "We need a video." And so then I go to the gala for the Elm Shakespeare Company and I meet the head of the New Haven Symphony Orchestra. "We need a video." I mean, really, that is the way it happens for me. The other thing is, I would say the old adage, never burn your bridges.
Sure.
Oh my gosh. So I've been working at CPTV for 30 years. If I had acted like a jerk, 30 years ago, just think of 30 years worth of projects. Is that really worth a little tiff? No, that's why you pretty much let things go, by. You don't make a huge, thing out of somebody, ate potato chips on the, just take them aside later and say, when I'm interviewing, please don't eat your potato chips on. So it's just, that's what I would say about, just don't burn your bridges.
So have either of you, I mean, the other thing when I think about, Connecticut has some very strong, Fortune 500 companies. Have either of you had any opportunities to sort of build relations from that corporate work with either like a foundation or somebody who's passionate about a project or a community that they want to do something that it kind of led to a totally unrelated documentary project?
Well, Jennifer has a great something to say about that, and I'm going to go plug in. So Jennifer, you're great.
It's on you, girl.
With Travelers.
Yes. Okay. Yes. So early on, I started to do work with Travelers, and I guess I should say really early on, I was doing work with Connecticut Public Television and had a relationship with some folks at Travelers. And we started to think about projects that made sense. And I guess the moral of the story is I think Travelers has funded 6 of my documentaries over the years. Maybe 7, I can't remember now, but it's gone on for quite a long time. And, you know, it's something to think about when you talk about not burning bridges, in that you want to develop relationships and not necessarily one-off clients or one-off funders, because they can help you with your career and the stories that you want to tell for, you know, for years to come. And so Travelers is a great example, and I'm grateful for them. And then eventually General Motors came on in my 2 recent projects. And again, sort of the idea of building relationships is key here. And it happened with some nonprofit folks too. So, you know, yes, you can get those initial, develop those initial relationships, and then you keep going with them. And Travelers in particular was a perfect client, because they always respected that wall between sponsor and content storyteller, and which is very important in the public television world. I'm sorry, I was stumbling a little because I saw Karyl's screen was going in my
That's
thought.
a really great point you're making, Jennifer, because basically in the public television world, if your funders have some interest, like some interest in what your content is, if there's a conflict of interest, then that's really not appropriate. So you've really got to be careful when you're building up your who's going to fund your documentary, that they're not somebody who has a conflict of interest. For instance, the Amistad Committee funded the film about the Amistad. I will say it was a great film, in that Steven Spielberg sent me a letter to say that it was, what did he say? Oh, I'm sorry. It was Yale. Yale sent me a letter to say that they were going to show my documentary over Steven Spielberg's film because it was a much better film. But PBS would not show it because it was funded by the Amistad Committee. And it looked like a conflict of interest. Now, they didn't know that I never heard from the Amistad Committee, who had nothing to say about my documentary. But the appearance of a conflict of interest can be as bad as actually people getting involved editorially in your documentary. So just be careful of your funding, that it does not even appear that they have an interest in your content.
And
so they were concerned that they were concerned that and somehow they shaped the story, and that the story would have a particular bias on it because of that funding.
Just keep in mind, yes, that I'm sure that was the case, but keep in mind that that's the PBS public television model. More and more, there are plenty of avenues for branded content, and I think just Karyl and I aren't in that world, but I know that plenty of documentaries get funded in that way, where there's some sort of product placement, et cetera. We just don't, I personally just don't know a lot about that.
So thinking about this, what is it like to be, you know, how often or how rarely do you have to work on a single project, or does most of your time as an independent filmmaker involve juggling many projects at the same time? And if so, how do you balance that and prioritize? Again, back to those soft skills, I guess.
Oh, there's so much balancing. I mean, Jennifer and I have talked about this a couple times, in that often if you have like a 1 year or 2 year project, a long documentary, it takes so long for the whole piece to come together that there's a lot of time in between when people are reviewing or people are writing or people are editing. And so there's these big gaps. And then you fill those with shorter projects. You know, I don't know if I would take 3 1-hour documentaries on at the same time. I mean, that could be just like, so, you know over time what you can do. And I think Jennifer's better at hiring people. Like if she starts to get full up, she'll start hiring people. I keep trying to do everything myself because I love directing, producing. I love to write. I love to edit. And I think she is very savvy with, finding really good people and getting a lot more projects done.
Well, I have a whole bunch of folks that I've worked with for 10 to 20 years now. And yes, so I have 3 documentaries going right now, and 12 educational shorts, and some other stuff that I can't remember right now. But I can't do any of it at all without great people, and that is still for sure. And then we're constantly bidding on projects as well. And I think part of it is I'm just so nervous that when something, that funding might fall through for something, or for instance, in the case of the pandemic, I had to cancel 30 days of shooting in 4 countries. And my husband's a stay-at-home dad who is sort of is a photojournalist, but now he doesn't have any work. So I just thankfully the educational projects have picked up and the documentary work is on hold, at least for a little bit. There's the research and post-production that's happening, but I can't shoot anything. So I don't know. So I take on a lot, and then I just find what I call angels, people that are great at what they're doing, and to help.
Are there any sort of logistical tools that you use that help you in managing the projects, like in regards to the process, whether it's pre or post or?
For me, in the Las Vegas series, it's essential. We actually did a workaround, and there's a tool called Lightroom. It's an Adobe product, and it's not meant to be used this way, but our crew there's a producer here in Connecticut. Our writer is in Copenhagen. The researchers are in Las Vegas. There's researchers in Washington, D.C. and in New York as well. And the editors in Boston. And so we needed to communicate on a weekly basis. And our part 1 was a little bit of a mess on the backside because we were trying to figure that out. Part 2, it worked it was amazing because we were able to all look at all the same visual images through Lightroom, make notes, and then we passed hard drives around, or we uploaded and downloaded, but we are also working in 4K, so that's really cumbersome. So anyway, so that's a good sharing tool. And then of course, things like Zoom and for communicating, and then all the usual stuff, the Google Docs.
And I just use Vimeo when we're trying to all look at the same cut together. Or, there's a way to make your comments. So we use Vimeo and it used to be that you could never say where in the film it is. And with the player, then people can actually note the time code. We used to have to burn the time code into each version of the tape. So it's all made it a lot easier. That's for sure.
That's an awesome tool. Absolutely. I send that to clients, and then they can make notes right in the middle of the video.
Oh, so great. Yeah.
Well, and so you both did a great segue. I'm going to skip around in our plan a little bit because, there has been these major changes. We're in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so these kind of tools for collaboration and being able to work remotely. I mean, we couldn't make films when everything was analog. How many years ago was that? 25 years ago, 20 years ago. We couldn't work. We would have been all research and pre-production, right? So how has this COVID-19 pandemic modified and impacted your work since, I guess, March?
Well,
Jen just said I think you had the biggest impact with 30 canceled days.
Thankfully, which gets back to having a bunch of projects at the same time. Thankfully, Las Vegas Part 2 was in post-production, so there was that. We weren't shooting. And the Mesa Verde project is still in its research stages. We need to go to Pueblos, and the Pueblos were hit very hard, and so we're not shooting that yet. The educational stuff has been great in that they are single one-day shoots. And so once it became safe, and it started like July 1st, I think was our first shoot. And and I have a shoot tomorrow, and then a shoot in August. And I think it was everybody's first shoot on that July 1st day on the crew I was working with. But, you know, we have a whole outline of COVID procedures, and it's a style of shooting that isn't documentary. It's post on camera, teleprompter, and then a whole bunch of folks behind the scenes, so we could all separate and maintain the 6-foot distance, all wear masks all day, and it worked just fine. You know, documentaries, it's different because you have to immerse yourself in the story over a longer period of time, and so I'm on hold with some of that stuff.
And for me, one good thing that came out of it is that normally in pre-production, you know, you actually end up talking to people on the phone because most people, you know, average people didn't know how to get on Zoom, you know, so, you know, you didn't really do that. But because of the pandemic, I talked to everybody I was thinking about interviewing on camera on Zoom first. And we happened to find someone who was extremely camera shy. And it wasn't until you actually got on the you know, and actually saw her, she was visibly just petrified. And so it was a great tool to really pre-interview someone about how, you know, good they are in front of cameras, as we call it, camera ready. Are they camera ready? And so she was not camera ready. So I went to another person. But I will say generally everything just slowed down to a complete stop for me. I was, you know, going to do 3 films for the Connecticut Women's Hall of Fame. Basically, they canceled all but one, and that's going to be shown virtually. So, you know, you go from 3 films that you're getting paid for to 1. And then I went and did my shoot today. So I have my 2 interviews that I'm going to use for the shoot. And then I'm going to edit that together, and that's going to be the 8-minute film. So, you know, everything else I'm just researching right now.
Yeah, it's been interesting. The University Film Video Association has been having its conference this week, the first ever virtual conference. And I encourage all of you aspiring filmmakers, if you're in school and you're a film student, join the UFVA, find out if your institution is an institutional member. But there was so much discussion about, you know, what is the long-term impact? And I think there is some exciting things about you know, the future of how filmmaking may never be quite the same after this pandemic. We'll get a little bit into that, but I think it's a good segue also to think about the changes you've seen, because we're seeing this huge abrupt change from the pandemic right now, but over your careers, there's been so many incredible changes, whether that be in technology or process or attention span. So can you talk a little bit about how you've been able to survive and thrive through your adaptability, and what are the things that have made you successful with that?
Well, I will say that when I first started my career, I had no idea how to edit. And as a producer, a director, a writer, those are self-explanatory. You know, but the editing was a much more technical process that required understanding of particular hardware and software. And so at a certain point, it became apparent that if I was going to work and afford the budgets for documentaries, I would have to learn at least how to offline. So I went and took some classes and learned at a very basic level Avid, and a very basic level Premiere, and then what was the other, Final Cut. And then what I found out is that it was an awesome tool for writing. So now what I really do is I offline everything while I'm writing it, and it will be ugly and messy and really more of a radio cut, but it allows me to understand the intonation and really what's working and not working within the body of the script.
Jen, I'm going to jump in really quickly. For the newbies out there, can you define what you mean when you're talking about offlining?
Okay. Offlining is sort of this, it's a rough process where you do not have any graphics, you do not have sound design, you do not color correct your images so that they all look like a similar intent and tonal quality. It's just very choppy cuts. There's no weaving of sound design. It's just choppy cuts so that you can make sure you're getting from point A to point B, that your narrative makes sense, all of that. And
Karyl, do you want to add to that about the changes you've seen?
Well, so basically I went from doing all long form documentaries to doing 30-second spots, because the days of people having, $250,000 to do a 1 hour documentary that takes you a year at least to do are almost gone, I would say, generally, with public television in Connecticut. It's, I guess there are some out there, but not a lot. So you just have to, I do a lot more for the internet now. I mean, people, everybody wants a video for their website. And what's wrong with that? What's wrong with the video for the website? It's still the basic storytelling skills. I mean, do you have the skills to tell a story? And so it's still a challenge, and you still meet interesting people. So, doing those short films I did on the Hillstead Museum and the Bush Holly House and the Peabody Museum, those are all 10-minute short documentaries. Those were all interesting. I met interesting people. And so sometimes it's almost great to just do something that's a little, I don't want to say easier, but it's not quite as cumbersome with the 100 interviews and, the year long. And, it's kind of a switch up, which can be fun.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point, Karyl, about the delivery and the platform for how the stuff's distributed in the end. I mean, that's changed dramatically. And I think, it seems like filmmakers are beginning to embrace the online platforms, the Amazons, the Netflixes, much more than, sort of like the film festival or television broadcast. I mean, would you agree?
Yeah, in fact, for the most part, every documentary I've ever done, I've just given to CPTV to show because I just wanted it to get out there. But I had a recent passion project, which I think there might be a link to, Beatrix Farron. And it was one of these projects that I just funded on my own. I mean, I just did all the traveling, it took me 4 years. I just took, I did everything. I took every picture. I did all the video. I did everything on it, never received any funding. And then I decided I don't really want to give this away. I want to have that experience as a filmmaker showing my film to real audiences. So it was just something I needed to do. So I booked myself into 80 different screenings from Key Largo, Florida, to Santa Barbara, to San Francisco, to Bar Harbor, Maine, so that I could show my film. And I wanted to meet the people along the way that were as enthusiastic about this, one of the founders of the American Society of Landscape Architects, Beatrix Farron, as I was. So that's what I did. It was a great experience. And so I made no money on it, but I'm glad I did it.
Awesome. So we have one last question, and then we're going to take our and this is a perfect segue. And I think the thing everybody's been waiting to hear about is, how are you able to live and work as a documentary filmmaker in Connecticut and make a living as a full-time documentary? And what are some of the opportunities, some of the exciting aspects of being here geographically, culturally? You both decided and made a decision. I'm going to stay in Connecticut. I'm going to be a Connecticut filmmaker.
Right. Tell
us why.
Well, I always believe home is where your family and your friends are. And I tried to live in New York for a little bit, at least as a production assistant and as an intern. And, it just wasn't for me. I just like nature, and I like being out in, I don't know, taking walks among the trees. Anyway. I've always believed that you could work anywhere. The technology now has proven over and over again that you can work anywhere. And most of the summer, I'm working in Vermont. There are co-working spaces up there, and it's easy. And then you just, until COVID, you go and you fly or drive to where your subjects are. So, often I'd say at this point, 99% of my subjects and clients are outside of the state of Connecticut. Even the educational projects, my client is outside of Connecticut, but I'm shooting in Connecticut and they don't mind. So I really believe you can work from anywhere, and so home is where your family and your friends are.
And that's really why I came back to. I have two sisters, four nieces and nephews. My mother's here. And it was the same thing. I was in California for 10 years. I lived in Arizona for 7, Texas for 3. I've lived in Kentucky for 4. I've lived a lot of places, but, my family was here. And so the same thing, quality of life, I really wanted to be around my family. But for 30 years, I have found, or as Jennifer would say, 20 plus. For 20 plus years, I have found the history of the state absolutely fascinating, from the very first documentary on the Amistad through the history of the Yale School of Medicine and the history of the New Haven Green and the history of crime and punishment in Connecticut and on and on. Everything has been basically about the history in Connecticut, and I've gotten to shoot here. Now, I was a mother bringing up my son, so I really needed to be in Connecticut. I wasn't able to fly and be at different places, so I arranged to have my studio here at my house. I could, stay up and edit till 2 or 3 or 4 in the morning and be here with my son and everything I needed to do. So I just made it work.
I was muted, sorry. That's awesome. I think a lot of us out there know that as mothers, as fathers, or at someday future parents, that means a lot when you have people around, because it is going to be a lot of late nights and a lot of long editing sessions. So that support is great. So let's go ahead and got some questions here from the audience. This one comes from Jackie Lightfield. Jackie would like to know, when interviewing public figures, do you need to get releases for a documentary?
I do.
Absolutely. I get a release from every single person that says anything in front of the camera.
Do you have a type of form that you use or a good resource that we can share with people to what that document should say?
Well, that's probably legal advice. So, I had a lawyer look at a form and make sure that it worked for the particular projects. And the
main points are that you're asking for all rights, for all future uses, for all media, whether it's been invented or not, in perpetuity, and also that there's no payment. So write your own, but basically you just want clearances to be able to use it for any purpose, and you are agreeing that they're not getting paid for it. I'd say those are the 2 crucial things.
Yeah.
Anything else from you, Jennifer?
Yeah, I will tell you that just working in music entertainment, it's if they're really big public figures, they're going to want to see the release ahead of time, and their agent will take care of line by line edits to that. But that's a whole different ask, and it wouldn't necessarily matter whether it was a documentary or an entertainment show or whatever. But there are lots of great samples out there for releases. So, you can look around and see what works for you.
But I would just add to it, because I see a lot of times with students, they get so busy on their productions, they forget that part. It's really important to get it up front, before you get started, because you don't want there's nothing more disheartening than someone coming back and not allowing you to finish your film, because if you don't have that release sign, you can't do it. And I think students have a tendency to think, oh, it's my friend or so-and-so, but you could have a falling out. And if you don't have that signed document,
absolutely,
even a student film could be, have to be thrown away.
Exactly.
So Karen Ritzenhoff is asking, we've heard so much about the Me Too movement, which of course was born out of the Hollywood film industry, by no coincidence, and how female talents have been harassed and assaulted in Hollywood. Karyl, did you encounter any sexism when you got to Los Angeles? You touched on that a little bit, but if you could expand on that. And Jennifer, what about you being a filmmaker?
So I remember my first job when I went to become the production secretary, and I was immediately asked to produce all the live sports. And so, it never occurred to me that a production secretary, with the lowest pay and the lowest title you could have, and I was producing all their live sports. So, equal pay, it certainly wasn't. I can't, I mean, there's always comments. There's always comments that back in the 80s, you pretty much had to ignore because, you had to be a team player and it's just, it's not that you let anything go on. It's just basically you walked away and didn't make it an issue. But that's the way you had to handle it back then to stay on the job. But nothing ever got so bad that I really felt that I couldn't stay because I was so badly harassed. So I didn't have to deal with, specific harassment that made me so uncomfortable I had to leave.
I just as a side note, one of the techniques I have used throughout my career to figure out how much I should get paid is that every year, every couple of years, I would go around to my male friends who are also freelancers who do similar work. And I would ask them what their day rates are. And thinking that I was probably charging the right amount and I should have lots of experience, blah, blah, blah. And sure enough, every time they were making more money than I was. And it wasn't because their client gave them more money. It's because they asked. And so I have tried to make sure that I am working or being paid at the same level. And the only way I know that is if I cross-check with my friends who are willing to share that information. Now, we all make choices in life, and they may be doing different kinds of work that would naturally pay more. But it's just a strategy I've used that has helped me. I think I've already talked about the sexual harassment stuff.
So on the other side of this, I think in particular to documentary, and this shows certainly in the Oscars and the number of female filmmakers in the documentary that have been nominated category over the last few years, comparably to the narrative feature films or other categories. It's the one area where we do see more women filmmakers. Suzanne Murphy asks, do you think that women have a different style of establishing relationships than men do? Thinking more about the approach to gentleness, she's put gentleness rather than domination, not sexuality, of course, but in regards to the interview, in regards to creating a film, what do you think about why you're drawn to it or why other women might be?
Well, it really stems from opportunity and money. Because documentaries cost a lot less than a feature, I think more women are given a chance because the funding is so much less than like a major motion picture. When I worked with Taylor Hackford in the 80s, it was starting at 8 million. That's just a minor kind of feature film. So you're more likely to get the money if it's, say, I don't know, $500,000, or a typical PBS documentary that I was making in the 80s was $250,000. So, I will say it's about the money. So then you have more opportunity because more women are given the opportunity because more of the men are taking the higher price items. We were having a discussion about this as far as, I hope in a way that, if you saw two films, you wouldn't automatically know if it was a man or a woman, because I think that we are both capable of doing things. But I do think, for instance, we were looking at one of Jen's films, and she, in one of her Las Vegas films, and she had included this wonderful female character. And I thought to myself, I don't think a man would have thought of bringing that character to life the way Jennifer did. It was just so magical to then, again, you see yourself reflected in this really gutsy woman in the West back in the day. And so I do think women make choices about being more inclusive and that maybe, not every man would think about.
Agree, and I felt the same way when I watched that film. So Agnish Mochi says, Karyl, you said you need to be a people's person. Can you be an introvert and still become a documentary filmmaker?
I do think so. I think you become so interested in your subject that when you sit down, it's basically all it is a conversation in a way between you and the person. All of my documentaries, I don't include myself. I'm not really on camera at all. I'm just having this very personal conversation between me, and you kind of get lost in it, what you're talking about, what they're actually telling. In fact, that's one of the biggest tips about interviewing, is to really listen, because so many people look down to their next question instead of saying, wait, that was really interesting. I didn't even think of that. What's all that about? So that's a very personal relationship, and you don't have to be Jane Pauley on camera, and be extroverted and feel great in front of a crowd to make a really great documentary and be a good interviewer.
Yes, and I think I actually, for people change over their lifetime, but I do feel like I was very much more of an introvert, maybe than I am now. But and I think what's helpful with this career is that you really understand the rules. When you walk onto a set or you're interviewing someone, you know your craft, you understand how you're supposed to behave on the set. And that makes it easier for introverts because we have the playbook. The second thing is over the years when I did the entertainment shows, I would say that 85%, if not higher, of the people I interviewed who are very, very famous would say they were introverts. And I was surprised. These are like rock stars. And I think that some of it's the same deal. Maybe they spent a lot of time in their bedrooms playing guitar when they were little. Or again, they understood the rules, got on stage, played, did their craft, and then walked away. So
that's a great point.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really true.
Well, and I love the idea of the listening piece. I mean, I think you can certainly be an introvert, but the key is to listen during the interview and be able to give that acknowledgement silently. Don't start interrupting or making noise. But, you have to love to be a listener, right?
And so many people are nervous about being interviewed. So suddenly you become the person calming this, very like Annie Leibovitz. I mean, she was so nervous. She cried within the first 10 minutes. And, you're thinking you are like a superstar and I'm comforting you. I mean, our roles were completely reversed. I mean, I was stunned to see her, and then I was telling her it was going to be okay,
Amazing. That
Yeah.
is amazing. Let's see, what do we have next? When you start out making a film, you have some idea where you'd like to accomplish from the get-go, what it's going to look like. What was the most unexpected turn that one of your documentaries took? So something that you started with in the early research, thinking it was going to be one way, and then something happened in the production process that made you make a completely different film. And what was the most exciting lesson that you learned from that unexpected turn of events?
Well, I've got that going now.
Okay, and so do I.
So it's the Street Project. I thought I was doing a part 2 to this 3 Seconds Behind the Wheel, which was a distracted driving project where we put cameras into cars and followed people's behavior for 6 months. I thought I was doing a part 2 on pedestrians and cyclists and better understanding the role distraction was playing in fatality rates with cyclists and pedestrians. And then suddenly I realized that distraction had nothing to do with it, and that there really was this massive movement across the world to create safe, walkable communities and cycling communities. And so it's morphed into that to become this grassroots activist kind of documentary. And then COVID hit, and now I can't follow my subjects anywhere. But at the same time, streets are closing across the world, becoming more pedestrian and cycling friendly. So I'm intentionally holding for a while to see where that goes. So stay tuned.
And I just put the link to the longer piece of that in the chat box. I encourage all of you, it's about 3.5 minutes, to watch that. And it's interesting, I keep thinking about how all of us as viewers, as we're watching stuff right now in this idea of the COVID pandemic and social distancing, but it's so interesting to watch that footage that's shot from the bicycle going across the Brooklyn Bridge, I assume, right? And the way that people are maneuvering and such. It's a very different perspective. And the anonymity of the camera in that shot was really compelling for that reason, because you're getting the authentic capturing of how people are reacting to that bicycle. So enjoy that after this talk. Back to the question. Go ahead, Karyl.
I just got a grant to do a project about Connecticut's resilient indigenous people. And I really felt, I didn't know the history of Native Americans in Connecticut, and I was really wanting to do a history so that I just understood it better after doing a short documentary on some sisters from the Pequots. And but the more I've been thinking about it, I almost feel like it really needs to come up to the present and talk about what are the people in the tribes doing now? Who are these, what are their stories and why are things happening the way they are? And I think what I was doing some preliminary research and found out, this is preliminary, but that basically a lot of the gaming part of the whole, indigenous people get into the gaming is order to pay the tens of millions of dollars it costs to become federally recognized. And the reason they want to be federally recognized is not to do gaming. It's because then they can get the federal grants for the housing, the roads, the community centers. They're looking for the federal recognition for federal grants. And I thought, here I've lived here almost my whole life, and I don't know anything about any of that. Like, what is going on with these communities?
And it's such an important human rights issue.
What's that?
It's such an important human rights issue.
Right, exactly.
And we're seeing it with the pandemic, with the delay in funding the Cherokee Nation and the indigenous peoples for the COVID relief.
Yeah. So,
which I don't know how much of that has gotten. So I think that's really, really interesting. And I'm wondering even how what the current situations of everything that's happening, Standing Rock, all of this activism that's happening in the world around us has to be influencing us as filmmakers in regards to the angle or the kind of story we want to tell. So I really appreciate you sharing that, Karyl.
Yeah.
It's important. Another question, Jen, you emphasized that you love to work in Connecticut. Do you make it a point to try to hire female professionals to support other women in the field? Are there more women doing lighting now, for example, or interns or people on the set, your crew? What do we do as women to support each other here in Connecticut?
Okay, I do want to emphasize that I hire plenty of guys, and there's a lot of great men and women out there. But sure, recently I was hiring somebody to help in the office, and it just happened that a bunch of young women had applied for the position. And so, sure, I'm really impressed with the number of female DPs that are out there now. That's fairly new to me. And so, sure, I love to hire a female DP whenever I can. I have a couple of great guys I work with. But absolutely, I have yet to hire a female sound or gaffer, sorry. Plenty of female teleprompter, plenty of female makeup artists, lots of female producers and writers. But the writer I work with the most right now is male. But anyway, sure, I'd love to, and I try to mentor women all the time, but I'll mentor guys too.
But I think that's really great. I mean, I think the thing that's wonderful about having this intimate, being a small state, we have this group, these badass female filmmakers, we're all from all over the state, but our state is so tiny, that you can drive from one corner to the other in a matter of a couple hours. And for me as a professor, and I know there's some other professors out there in the audience, it's so important that we have opportunities for our female students to be able to be mentored by other women filmmakers, just for the confidence building, for the understanding, and for the opportunities that are there. So another question, this is, it says it's a bit of a provocative question, but it's not that provocative, don't worry. Today, everyone has a phone and is becoming a broadcaster from a camera and is a platform to show their film on Vimeo or YouTube or TikTok. But what makes a filmmaker in this day of media saturation and delivery and content production?
Well, that's a good question.
Yes.
Well, it's funny because people say to me, "Are you a videographer?" And I always say no. To me, that was always the question. People think I shoot everything, and I basically don't shoot any of my own stuff because, you hire people when you're doing, um, things for broadcast, films for broadcast. It's always, a broadcast crew from the TV station. So, I've always called myself a filmmaker because, I hire the crew, I, direct. Um, but I think, if that's the medium you have and if you're doing, learning the conventions of filmmaking, and then maybe experimenting, then you're a filmmaker. If you're really trying to work at the craft, it's just like if you say, are you a cabinet maker? Well, if you're really working at the craft and you're trying to make a beautiful cabinet, so if you're a filmmaker and you're really trying to craft a beautiful story and a beautiful film with great lighting and good sound, to me, you're a filmmaker.
It's all about the story. It's always been about the story. It doesn't matter what platform, whether you're on TikTok or on Instagram, TV, or whatever. It's all about the story, and it doesn't matter. It matters less and less what type of equipment you use. I do strongly believe that even if you're using your iPhone, that good lighting makes a huge difference. But absolutely, in this street project, I'm using GoPros. I'm using my own new cell phone on a Osmo for some of it, and I'm using on an amazing DP with lots of prime lenses and fancy cameras. And so I'm mixing them all up, and that can be a nightmare for the editor. But anyway, there's somebody that you're going to interview further along in this series. Paula Bronstein would be the first person to tell you that sometimes using an iPhone is the best way to get the story because it's not intimidating, because you can look the person in the eyes. It's a medium people are used to. And so absolutely use your iPhone.
And what's even more important than the picture?
The story?
The sound.
Oh, the sound. That is so true.
People will forgive a bad picture, but people want good sound.
That's true.
It's so true. That's one of the things that does separate films. And when we think, I have my students do this exercise and encourage all of you to do that, where you take your favorite cut of a film, just a couple minutes, and you watch it, then you close your eyes and you only listen, and you think about all the distinctiveness of the sound design. It's really enlightening, and it helps, when you want to be a good editor, to really understand the importance of that. Another question, and we've got about maybe one or two more questions, and we're doing great. This is fantastic. You talked a little bit earlier about collaborative, and we were talking about those soft skills. Do you like to work in teams? Do you always work with the same camera person and audio person, or the post-production editor, or do you sometimes do many positions yourselves? Like when regards to collaboration and maybe cooperation, what are some of your preferences?
To me, it's all about the budget. If I had a great budget, I would hire a lot more of things to be done. But, basically, I pretty much do everything but the shooting and the sound on location. And I pretty much do everything else. I love a couple of great crews I've used forever and would keep using them, but I'd be willing to try other crews, if I've heard good references about them.
Yeah, for me, it's all, it certainly is about the budget, but it's definitely, if you have the budget, teamwork, working in a team, there is nothing like it. It is just so wonderful to be able to collaborate, to be able to bounce ideas off of different folks. I have projects now I'm struggling with. I'm not sure where to go with them. And if I can talk to somebody or a couple of people about that, I'm just very thankful, and I appreciate that process. And I do, everybody has their own skill set, and it's impossible, I believe, to be great at everything. So when I have the budgets, I do want to hire people who are great at what they do.
So this is a good question, Karyl. This is directed to you, although I'm sure, Jen, you've also got can put some feedback onto this too. But Karyl mentioned this earlier because you talked about Annie Lieberman and some of the really heavy hitters you interviewed. So you had this opportunity at age 25, your first time to be able to interview one of these heavy hitters. A lot of people go to LA, want to be an aspiring filmmaker, and they don't get into the industry. So what was the hook that got your foot into that difficult first time into the door into to build a network that you weren't born into, so to speak?
Yes.
How did you get in there? And then I'm also going to add, if you want to share, either of you, any little tidbits of how you felt in that first big, what was that first big interview? And like, as a young person, a young woman, what was that experience like inside?
So when I got to LA, I joined every women's organization. Women in Film and American Women in Radio and Television were the two big national organizations, because I had to cut my, competition, so to speak, in half, and I really needed more experience. And at the beginning, that very first job where I was asked to interview John Huston, it was volunteer. I just volunteered to do it, and look what I got out of it. I remember being in the room with John Huston, and he was in a wheelchair by then. And he comes out, like in a t-shirt and a running jacket with an oxygen bottle. And I think it was his last interview. And he was so intimidating, even confined to a wheelchair. He challenged me on just about everything I asked him. And it was a great test. It shows you've got to be prepared no matter who the person is. Like, I hadn't seen one of his films, and he was shocked that I hadn't seen that film. And I was like, oh. It was a great experience. Absolutely loved it. But being kind of trying to get in with other women who might be helpful. And that is also how I got the National PBS documentary. And I was hired as just a paid assistant. And I became the associate producer for a national PBS film that was nominated for a national Emmy. Over the 2 years I worked for it, I just kind of worked up until I was the associate producer. So it is a lot of networking and just being willing to do absolutely anything that people need you to do. Cup of coffee, park a car at the beginning, whatever needs to be done, you do it.
Yeah, that's true. Joining every organization, I still do that. I try to sort of target it a little bit more because, of time. But yes, joining organizations is essential. And everybody, you feel like awkward. Oh, I'm networking, and networking is like this evil word. But everybody gets it. Everybody understands. And if they can help, they will. And lots of internships. And certainly don't be afraid to call people or email people and just say, hey, I'm not looking for a job. I'm not even looking for an internship. I just want to pick your brain about how you got into the field. And if you just talk to a bunch of people, email a bunch of people, most people are happy to help in some way, or to at least tell people how they did it and maybe pass along a few contacts.
That's excellent. So the last final words from either of you. We have a lot of many aspiring Connecticut filmmakers out there. Last words of advice.
Mine would be to really go for what your passion is. I mean, at 21, I moved to California. I got a master's in filmmaking. I, got a job in television. I moved to LA. I got a job in feature films and a children's series, and then went on to a national documentary. Do what you absolutely are passionate about, because that's how much stamina you will need, that level of passion to actually make it to a very high level. So don't just, be satisfied with, oh, they said it's very competitive. Well, yeah, but it's worth it. You're going to be doing this for 40 or 50 years. So go for what you absolutely want to do.
Absolutely. I would say the same thing. As a freelancer, which most people will become, you need to be focused and good at what you do. And I would say, focus, direction the whole way. It doesn't mean that you're inflexible, and you may need to work on other projects or do other things. Everybody's got a problem, and if you're willing to help them solve their problem with your craft, your skill, your medium, your passion, your desires, then it's a two-way street. You're helping each other. Stay focused, figure out what you really want in life, have a whole network of folks that help you. I saw that there was one question about something about being alone or doing it on your own, or I don't know. Were either of you married at first? And I would say, yeah, having somebody that supports your back along the way is really, really helpful, because it's hard, it's time consuming. Just stay focused and hopefully know what you want and go for the money. Don't worry about the money, it'll come later.
Well, that is some awesome advice. Ladies, it has been such a pleasure to be able to spend this time with you tonight. Thank you, thank you, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks to the Digital Media Connecticut and the Connecticut Office of Film, Television, and Digital Media for producing this show. I want to invite you all to tune in on Thursday evenings. It'll be every other Thursday for the next several years for the continuation of the Let's Talk Media series. We've got several planned shows, including our next one on August 13th, which is The Power of Documenting in the Moment with the incredible journalist Paula Bronstein. She's actually in Portland right now documenting the protests. So this is some really, really important work that she'll be sharing with us. Then we've got Finding the Network After Graduation, Taking Advantages of Opportunities, which will be on August 27th. We'll bring Karyl Evans back, and we've also got Tracy Heather Strain coming on. And finally, we've got Making Films That Matter with Agnish Moshi on September 24th. We've got one other one that'll be a surprise in between then, and we'll have another final one that'll be geared towards helping networking and such for students as well. Also, go to the Digital Media Connecticut website. You'll also be able to get links to the new Select CT podcast series, where you can hear incredible content from all different aspects of digital media across the state. And finally, wear your mask, stay home, and stay safe. Please, Connecticut is doing awesome right now in this pandemic, but we've got to keep it up. So do your part, do it for others. Thank you for coming, and we will see you in 2 weeks at 5 o'clock on the same YouTube channel. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.